Hello, welcome to the Learn English Lab. Today's podcast, C1 Level Advanced English Vocabulary Practice topic name is 40 plus C1 Level Vocabulary on Culture and Tradition. So this is a deep dive we've put together specifically for your learning goals. We get that you want more than just dictionary definitions. You're looking for that necessary nuance, right, to really navigate those complex global discussions. And these 30 plus terms we're covering, they aren't just vocabulary lists. Think of them more as analytical tools. They're what you need to get beyond simple descriptions of society and really develop some intellectual depth.
Precisely. We're focusing on the language you need to sound sophisticated, to articulate complex ideas. If you want to talk properly about how societies form, how they evolve, where the tensions lie, well, these terms, from acculturation right through to epistemology, they're your building blocks. We're aiming to show you how they actually work in context, so you can discuss, ancient history or modern digital communities with real precision and authority.
Okay, fantastic. Let's get into it then. We should probably start by sort of building the foundation. If you picture society like a house, we need to look at its basic framework first. The structure, how communities define themselves, that group identity piece. And a good starting point seems to be contrasting that idea of uniformity versus diversity within a society.
Yeah, absolutely. Our first key term here, really fundamental for understanding pretty much any modern nation or global city, is multiculturalism. Number 41 on our list. Now, this isn't just about diversity existing by chance. It's the active practice of giving importance, real value, to all cultures within a society. It embodies what some call cultural pluralism or a deliberate inclusive ethos.
Right. And you see this in practice, don't you? Governments often promote it directly through policies, maybe funding different ethnic festivals or supporting community language schools, things like that. And when it works well, the upsides are pretty clear. These places can become really dynamic hubs. They attract global talent. They boost the economy, partly because they're, genuinely comfortable places for diverse people to actually live and work.
Definitely. But, having good policies doesn't magically erase the debates that come with it. There's always this inherent tension, isn't there? Balancing that celebration of diversity with the need for some kind of national unity or cohesion. The big question is always, how do you support distinct cultural groups without weakening the common social bond that holds the whole thing together? It's a constant balancing act and negotiation, really.
Okay, so that's one approach. Then there's another concept often mentioned alongside it, but actually quite different, a melting pot. That's number one. People sometimes mix these up with multiculturalism, but it's distinct, right? A melting pot implies that different people and ideas exist together, but the expectation is more towards cultural fusion. They blend, they mix, and often create something new altogether.
Yeah, that's the key difference, the fusion part. You see it really clearly in things like food. Think about New York City. It's sort of the classic example. It's not just that you find food from everywhere. It's that those immigrant traditions merge. They create hybrid dishes, new culinary styles. You get this innovative blend that's unique to New York. It's a kind of creative synthesis.
Mm-hmm. Synthesis. I like that. And it happens in other areas too.
Oh, sure. Think about a university campus. It's a melting pot of ideas, different ideologies, and that blending, that challenging of viewpoints is what fosters intellectual growth. It forces people to think beyond their own assumptions.
Okay, so multiculturalism and the melting pot represent diversity and fusion. What's the opposite end of that spectrum?
That would be a society described as homogeneous. Number 37. This means it consists of things or people that are basically all the same, or all of the same type. The population is essentially uniform, consistent.
And what does that look like in practice?
Well, in a very homogeneous community, you often find this really strong, almost automatic adherence to old customs, established traditions, simply because there aren't many competing influences around. And the research suggests these communities can sometimes show a kind of natural insularity, a resistance to outside ideas or cultural trends.
But that must be harder to maintain now.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In today's world, with globalization, digital media, even just basic trade, that uniformity is constantly being challenged. It forces these groups to either double down and rigidly preserve their identity, or, more likely, slowly start to diversify. #tag B, group identity and scale.
All right, so we've looked at the mix within a society. Now let's scale up a bit, thinking about larger group identities and achievements. The term civilization comes to mind here. Number 7. It refers to human society with well-developed social organizations, right? And also the specific culture and lifestyle of a society at a particular time.
Exactly. And to really get the weight of this term, historical examples help. Think of ancient Egyptian civilization. What defines it? Well, partly it's incredible social ingenuity that allowed for things like the pyramids. That level of organization, that collective effort, it's quite staggering.
Compared to now.
Well, compare that to how we might define modern civilization. It's less about huge physical structures, maybe, and much more about our heavy reliance on technology, the ability to connect globally instantly. That's a defining feature now.
It's a fascinating comparison, shows how the idea itself evolves. One thing that often gets glossed over, though, is why civilizations decline. It's not always about being conquered, is it?
No, not at all. Internal factors are often huge. Internal conflicts, political divisions, mismanaging resources. These can weaken a civilization from the inside just as much or even more than external threats. That's a key insight.
Okay, so from the grand scale of civilization, let's zoom in to the emotional glue that holds smaller groups together. That brings us to peoplehood, number 8.
Peoplehood.
Yeah.
It describes that state, that condition of being or belonging to a unified people. It really highlights that crucial communal bond, that sense of ethnic unity.
This feels really important for groups trying to preserve their identity against outside pressures.
Hugely important. Think about indigenous tribes. They often rely on a very strong sense of peoplehood to maintain their history, their language, their connection to ancestral lands. It's almost a cultural defense mechanism.
And it's adapting to modern times too, right?
It really is. What's fascinating now is how diaspora communities groups living away from their homeland manage to sustain their peoplehood. They use virtual networks, online forums, shared digital traditions. It shows that physical closeness isn't the only way to maintain that unity anymore.
Okay. And then for the individual living within or between these cultures, there's biculturalism, number 5. This is about including or representing two different cultures, having that sort of dual culturalism or hybrid identity.
Yes, and the practical advantages for the individual can be significant. Someone who is bicultural can often navigate really smoothly between different social norms. You know, switching maybe between formal Eastern business etiquette and a more casual Western approach, that's a real skill.
And personally enriching too, I imagine.
Absolutely. Think about families where you have diverse rituals or cuisines being shared. Holidays become unique blends. Meals draw on traditions from both sides. It often creates something richer, drawing strengths from both cultures. It's a kind of personal duality.
Okay, so we've got the basic structure down. Now let's look at how culture isn't static. It moves, it changes, it gets learned. How does that process actually start? How do we learn culture in the first place? Hashtag TEFE, learning and transmission.
Well, the very first step, the fundamental process, is called enculturation. Number 29. This is basically the modification of an individual's behavior, starting right from infancy, to fit in with the demands of their social life. It's the core of socialization, or what we might call upbringing.
And this happens everywhere, all the time, doesn't it? It starts right in the home, learning family traditions, moral codes, how to speak.
Exactly. It begins very intimately. But then it quickly extends into institutions. Schools, for example, they don't just teach reading and writing. They teach national history, civic values, the accepted stories about the country. That's a huge part of state-level enculturation.
And the way this happens differs massively across the world, right? Which shapes how people see things.
Precisely. The variations in enculturation are what ultimately lead to such diverse worldviews. What one culture teaches as an absolute truth, maybe a religious belief or an idea about family structure, another culture might see completely differently or dismiss entirely. It's a subtle but incredibly powerful force shaping our perception of everything.
So once a culture is learned, it doesn't just stay put, it spreads. That's culture diffusion, number 15.
Yes, culture diffusion. It's the spreading out of cultural traits, ideas, styles, technologies, beliefs, from some central point outwards. Think of it as dissemination or propagation.
Historically, how did that happen?
Well, trade routes were the classic example. The Silk Road didn't just move silk and spices. It spread religions, technologies, artistic styles, even food ingredients across vast distances. Spices ending up in European cooking is a direct result of that diffusion.
And now, it's much faster, I assume.
Unbelievably faster. Social media, the internet, the acceleration is just unprecedented. A fashion trend, a slang word, a meme, it can go viral globally in a matter of hours or even minutes. This also drives constant linguistic change as languages borrow words back and forth at incredible speed. #B, adaptation and adjustment.
Okay, so culture gets learned, it spreads. But what about when people move? When they find themselves living in a totally different cultural environment? That adjustment process is acculturation, number 3.
Right. Acculturation is that process of changing, adapting, to become more like the people from a different culture you're now living amongst.
Is that the same as assimilation? People often use that word too.
It's often confused, but there's a really important nuance. Assimilation kind of implies replacing your old culture with the new one. Acculturation is more about blending. Think of an immigrant family. They might adopt local customs, maybe celebrate national holidays of the new country, learn the language for work and school, but they might still speak their native language at home, maintain their own religious practices, cook their traditional food. It's often a dual existence, a blend.
But that blending isn't always easy, is it? I remember reading that if it happens too fast or is forced.
That's a critical point. The sources really emphasize this. If there's pressure for rapid acculturation, if people feel forced to change too quickly, it can lead to real identity crises, especially for younger people who might feel caught between worlds, not fully belonging to either their heritage culture or the new host culture. It can be very stressful.
So what's the ideal outcome then, when the blending works well?
Ideally, you get cultural integration. Number 40. This is when individuals or groups manage to adopt practices from the host culture without losing or diminishing their own cultural identity. It's a successful cultural merging, a kind of hybrid adaptation.
And societies can actually support this.
Yes, definitely. Things like bilingual education programs are a great example of supporting cultural integration. At a bigger level, when integration works well, it tends to reduce social tensions in diverse cities. It helps create more harmonious, productive communities. But it requires effort from both sides, the newcomers and the host society.
Okay, but that smooth integration probably doesn't happen overnight. What about that initial phase, that feeling of being completely lost?
Yes. That initial impact, the psychological and sometimes even physical stress of landing in a vastly different way of life, that's culture shock. Number 21. It involves a lot of confusion, worry, a real sense of disorientation or adjustment anxiety.
And it can be triggered by small things, right? Like how people cue or what's considered polite.
Absolutely. Unfamiliar etiquette, different paces of life, communication styles, even just how shops work. It can all feel overwhelming. It's usually an intense but temporary seed of stress.
What's the best way to cope with it?
The consistent advice is usually immersion. Actively get involved in local activities, try to learn the language, even just observe carefully. Confronting the unfamiliar rather than hiding from it seems to be key.
I've also heard that people who've been through it often help newcomers.
Yes, there's often a strong support network that forms. Expats who've successfully navigated culture shock will often share their stories, their tips, their embarrassing moments with those just arriving. It kind of normalizes the experience and helps prepare people for that initial disorientation. It's a very practical form of support.
All right, we've talked about how cultures form, blend, and are learned. But interactions aren't always positive. Conflict, bias. These are also part of the picture. This next set of vocabulary gives us the tools to analyze those more difficult aspects. #, bias and extremism.
Yeah, this is crucial. And we need to start by carefully distinguishing between two terms that often get confused. Patriotism, number 6, and chauvinism, number 2. Patriotism is generally seen as that positive feeling, the love and devotion you have for your country. A sense of community, maybe pride in its achievements. You often see it surge during things like national holidays or international sporting events.
Okay, that sounds positive. But you said distinguish it from chauvinism. Where's the line?
The line can be thin, and this is where C1 level analysis really matters. True patriotism, arguably, includes the ability to be constructively critical, wanting your country to be better, which means acknowledging its flaws. Chauvinism, on the other hand, is more like blind loyalty. It's an unreasonable, often quite aggressive belief that your own country, or perhaps your own group, is inherently superior to all others. It kind of blinds you to any value or achievement outside your own group.
Right, so patriotism allows for critique. Chauvinism rejects it.
In essence, yes. And political rhetoric often deliberately blurs this line, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Appealing to national pride can easily slide into stirring up chauvinistic sentiments to gain support or deflect criticism. You also see cultural chauvinism, where maybe one nation dismisses the art or philosophy of another as just fundamentally inferior, simply because it's foreign.
And if you take that belief in superiority to its extreme,
then you get into supremacism. Number 18. This is the systematic belief, the ideology that one particular group, maybe based on race, culture, religion, should dominate or control others because they are supposedly inherently better. It's a dominance ideology.
This obviously has incredibly dark historical connections.
Absolutely. Racial supremacism, for example, has fueled horrific atrocity throughout history, but we also need to recognize its subtler modern forms. Cultural supremacism can manifest when, say, large international organizations ignore or dismiss local knowledge systems in developing countries, assuming their Western approach is automatically superior. Activists are constantly fighting against this kind of thinking.
And this belief in superiority often translates directly into action, into discrimination, number 27, which is treating a group less fairly than others simply because of who they are.
Exactly. Discrimination is a persistent global problem. You see it in the workplace based on ethnicity, gender, age, religion, where it blocks opportunities. Laws exist to fight it, sure, anti-discrimination laws. But the social damage is huge, too. It erodes trust within communities and stops entire groups of people from contributing their full potential. Hashtag B. Internal divisions and core beliefs.
Okay, so that's conflict between groups, but divisions can also happen within groups, often based on beliefs. This brings us to denominationalism, number 25.
Yes. Denominationalism is that tendency, particularly within religions, but sometimes other belief systems too, to divide into different sects or denominations. You could call it sectarianism or factionalism.
We see this historically with different branches of Christianity, for example.
That's a prime example. It shaped the religious landscape in many parts of the world. Sometimes these divisions lead to fragmented communities, people living side by side geographically, but operating under quite different social or moral codes derived from their specific denomination.
Are there ways to bridge these divides?
Well, efforts like formal interfaith dialogue are really important. Trying to foster mutual understanding and respect between these different factions within or between religions is crucial for community harmony.
And when different cultural values or beliefs clash more broadly, not just within a religion?
Then you have cultural conflict. Number 17, this is the tension, the friction that occurs when different cultural values, beliefs, or expectations collide. It creates intercultural tension or discord.
Can you give an example?
Sure. A really common one is generational divides. You might have traditional elders in a community who oppose modernizing changes related to, say, technology use or marriage practices or women's roles. That's a cultural conflict. On a larger scale, debates around immigration often involve cultural conflict. What are the expectations for integration? How much should newcomers adapt versus maintaining their own traditions? These clashes often require immense empathy, dialogue, and a willingness to compromise from everyone involved to find resolution.
Sometimes, though, there are beliefs or customs that people just refuse to question no matter what. What's the term for that?
You're talking about a sacred cow. Number 10, it's a belief, a custom, maybe an institution, that people hold so dear they won't tolerate any criticism or questioning of it. It's treated as an untouchable idea.
These aren't just religious things, right?
No, not at all. Sacred cows can exist anywhere. In some societies, a particular form of government might be treated as one, or maybe long-standing traditions around arranged marriage. You even find them in organizations. Think of that outdated company policy that everyone knows is inefficient, but nobody challenges because we've always done it this way. That's a corporate sacred cow.
Underlying all these conflicts and beliefs are the fundamental principles guiding a group. Core values, number 28.
Exactly. Core values are those fundamental ethics or ideals that guide how people make decisions, build relationships, and solve problems. They're like the bedrock principles.
So things like honesty or respect?
Those are common examples, yes. In many traditional societies, things like reciprocity or community harmony might be absolutely central core values. Companies try to define their own core values to shape their corporate culture and guide employee behavior. And on a personal level, having clear core values helps you navigate tricky ethical situations.
Now, this next one sounds quite philosophical. Epistemology, number 31. The study of knowledge itself. How does that relate to culture?
This is where we get really deep. Epistemology, the theory of knowledge, basically asks, how do we know what we know? What counts as valid knowledge or truth? And its connection to culture is profound. It forces us to ask how our cultural background shapes what we even consider to be true or factual. Does culture influence our understanding of science, of history, of morality? Absolutely.
So understanding epistemology helps you critique things.
Precisely. It's a vital tool for critically analyzing, say, biased historical accounts, like challenging Eurocentric versions of world history that might ignore or downplay contributions from other cultures. It also helps you appreciate the validity of traditional or indigenous knowledge systems, which might have been dismissed by Western science in the past. It's about questioning the source and nature of knowledge itself.
Okay, Let's shift focus a bit now. How are societies actually structured, particularly thinking about power, wealth, and how cultures are perceived, or maybe misperceived? Let's start with those layers in society. Hashtag A, hierarchy and inequality.
Right. The formal term for those layers is social stratification. Number 12. It refers to how people in a society are categorized into hierarchical groups. This is usually based on socioeconomic factors, things like wealth, income, education level, the type of job they do. It's the basis of class division or social hierarchy.
Historically, this was often very rigid, wasn't it? Like in feudal systems.
Extremely rigid. In feudal systems or caste systems, your position was largely fixed at birth. Social mobility was incredibly limited. Where you were born pretty much determined your entire life.
And how does it look today? It's maybe subtler, but still there?
It's often subtler, yes, but definitely still there. You see social stratification clearly in things like stark divides between wealthy and poor neighborhoods and cities. You see it in unequal access to quality education or healthcare. And a really significant modern form is the digital divide, the gap between those who have easy access to technology and the internet and those who don't. This creates whole new layers of advantage and disadvantage.
Is education still seen as the way to overcome this?
Education is often highlighted as the main pathway for social mobility for bridging these gaps. But in reality, the system often struggles to counteract the effects of inherited wealth and background advantages. So stratification remains a major challenge pretty much everywhere.
This structure often connects to discussions about what motivates society, which brings us to commercialism, number 9. This is about activity driven more by profit than by, say, quality or doing good. The focus on materialism, consumerism?
Yes, and commercialism often comes in for sharp critique, especially when it intersects with culture. Think about how major holidays are often criticized for becoming overly commercialized. The focus shifts massively towards buying gifts, spending money, sometimes overshadowing the original spiritual or community meaning.
And it affects art and culture, too.
Big time. Art critics frequently lament commercialism, turning unique cultural artifacts or even entire artistic traditions into mere commodities to be bought and sold for the highest profit. We also see it in the global spread of big Western brands, which can sometimes overwhelm local products and traditions in non-Western markets. It's a powerful, homogenizing force in some ways. Hashtag B, representation and deviation.
Okay, so we have these stratified societies, often driven by commercialism. How do groups within them perceive each other? This is where stereotypes come in, isn't it? Number 14.
Stereotypes. Those fixed ideas or images people have about a particular group, which are often untrue, usually simplistic and frequently harmful or offensive, like a mental cliche or generalization.
And the media plays a big role in spreading these, right?
Often, yes. Media, for simplicity or sometimes bias, relies on shorthand. Think of recurring character types, the mad scientist, the foreign villain with specific accent. These reinforce stereotypes. And the real danger is that these generalizations actively block genuine understanding between cultures. Challenging stereotypes, showing the diversity within any group, is absolutely essential work for building better cross-cultural relationships.
Now, what about groups that don't just get stereotyped but actively reject the mainstream culture? That's a counterculture, number 13.
Exactly. A counterculture defines itself by its opposition to the dominant values and behaviors of society. Its values are deliberately, fundamentally different. It's essentially a rebel movement or promotes an alternative lifestyle.
The 1960s hippie movement is the classic example, I guess.
That's the one everyone thinks of, yes. Rejecting materialism, conformity, supporting peace movements, experimenting with different ways of living. But you see countercultural elements today, too. Perhaps in radical environmental activist groups advocating for drastic changes to our economic system, challenging consumer culture head-on. The key is that rejection of mainstream norms.
But not all groups that are different are trying to overthrow the system. Many just exist alongside it. These are subcultures, number 16.
Precisely. A subculture is a smaller group within the larger society that has its own distinct beliefs, values, styles, and behaviors. A minority culture or faction, but one that generally coexists with the mainstream.
Can you give some examples?
Well, loads. Think about the gaming subculture with its own jargon, online communities, specific social rules, or urban graffiti artists who have their own aesthetic codes and ways of interacting with public space, skateboarders, goths, specific music scenes, all examples of subcultures.
And these often influence the mainstream eventually, don't they?
Very often. Subcultures are frequently like cultural laboratories. They experiment with fashion, music, language, ideas, And quite often, elements that start in a niche subculture eventually get picked up and adopted by the mainstream culture, sometimes years later. Think about fashion trends or music genres.
Okay, this is great. We've looked at structures, conflicts, perceptions. Now let's dive into the actual stuff of culture, the heritage, the traditions, the different forms it takes, from the ancient to the digital. Let's start with what holds a community together. #A, foundations and preservation.
A really useful metaphor here is the fabric of society, number 24. It refers to that interconnected, interdependent nature of a community, its social structure, the communal weave, if you like.
And like fabric, it can be strengthened or weakened.
Exactly. Things like a strong education system, a shared sense of justice, rule of law, these strengthen the fabric. Shared traditions, rituals that bring people together also reinforce those bonds. Conversely, things like deep inequality, widespread corruption, or intense social division can act like tears in the fabric, weakening the whole structure, potentially leading to instability or breakdown.
And the stuff that's passed down through this fabric, that's inheritance or heritage, number 39.
Yes. Heritage encompasses all the history, the traditions, the beliefs, the physical objects that are considered an important part of a society's character and identity. Its legacy, its patrimony.
And this can be tangible or intangible, right?
Absolutely. There's the cultural inheritance of things you can't touch, like language, music, storytelling traditions, knowledge systems. That's intangible heritage. But there's also the physical heritage. Ancient buildings, archaeological sites, historical artifacts, landscapes. Preserving architectural heritage is about protecting that physical legacy.
Even small things can be heritage.
Definitely. Think about family recipes passed down through generations. That's a form of culinary heritage, part of a family's or community's inheritance.
This connects closely to long-standing culture, 32, and traditional beliefs and customs, practices that have just been around for ages.
These are the enduring traditions, the ancestral rituals, things observed over a very long period, often forming a core part of a culture's identity.
Like the Japanese tea ceremony.
That's a perfect example. It's a long-standing cultural practice, deeply embedded, promoting mindfulness, specific etiquette, aesthetics. It's endured for centuries. Many traditional beliefs and customs continue to guide really important life events. Think about wedding ceremonies or funeral rites in many cultures. They provide structure, meaning, connection to the past.
But these are also vulnerable, aren't they?
Very much so. Globalization, urbanization, the sheer pace of modern life. These can put immense pressure on long-standing traditions, especially those from more remote or isolated communities. There's a real risk of them fading away if they're not actively preserved or adapted. #B, specific forms of culture.
Okay, let's get more specific about different types of traditional culture. There's folk culture, number 35. How is that different?
Folk culture typically refers to the cultural products and practices of relatively small-scale, often rural, homogeneous groups. Think handmade crafts, traditional folk music specific to a region, local dialects, folk tales. It's often quite localized.
And like long-standing customs, it's also under threat.
Often, yes. Mass production can undercut handmade crafts. Urbanization can draw younger generations away from rural traditions. Folk culture often thrives through direct person-to-person transmission, so when communities disperse, it's harder to maintain. Museums and folk festivals play a really important role in trying to keep it visible and valued.
Okay, and how does that compare to indigenous culture or local culture, number 36?
Indigenous culture specifically refers to the cultures of the native peoples who were present in a location before colonization or the arrival of a currently dominant culture. It's tied to concepts of First Peoples and their unique relationship with their ancestral lands.
And there's often a strong connection to nature.
Very often, yes. Many indigenous cultures emphasize a deep spiritual connection and harmony with the natural environment, which is reflected in their beliefs, rituals, art, and traditional ecological knowledge. Protecting indigenous culture is therefore often inseparable from advocating for their land rights and environmental protection.
Do indigenous cultures stay static?
Not at all. That's a common misconception. Contemporary indigenous artists, musicians, writers are incredibly innovative, often blending traditional forms and themes with modern techniques and media. It's a dynamic living culture, not just a historical relic.
We mentioned intangible heritage earlier. Let's revisit that with intangible cultural heritage, number 30. It seems quite specific.
It is. This term refers specifically to the non-physical aspects of heritage practices, representations, expressions, knowledge, skills that communities recognize as part of their cultural legacy. Think oral traditions, performing arts, like specific dances or music, social practices, rituals, festive events, traditional craftsmanship knowledge. Organizations like UNESCO have specific programs to try and safeguard this kind of heritage because it's particularly vulnerable. Since it's not embodied in a physical object, if the chain of transmission passing it from one generation to the next is broken, it can be lost forever.
Okay. Now for two quite specific types of intangible heritage, shanties and dirges, number 34. What are these?
Right, these are types of traditional songs. Shanties are work songs, most famously associated with sailors. They use them to coordinate their labor to keep rhythm while doing heavy tasks like hauling ropes or raising anchors. They often have a call and response structure.
Dirges.
Dirges are songs of lament, typically sung at funerals or during mourning periods. They express grief and sorrow. Both shanties and dirges often served important social functions. Shanties for work coordination and community building on ships, dirges for communal expression of grief and remembrance. They also help preserve oral histories and stories within those communities.
Do people still sing them?
You find them performed at folk festivals, sometimes in historical reenactments. It's often a conscious effort to connect with those ancestral traditions and preserve that part of musical heritage.
And grounding all this history, we have the physical places. A historical site, number 26.
Yes, any place, a building, a ruin, a battlefield, a whole district that's considered important because of its connection to historical events, significant architecture or cultural developments, a heritage landmark, a cultural relic.
And their value is mainly educational.
Educational value is huge, absolutely. Visiting a site like, say, the Roman Colosseum or Machu Picchu gives you a kind of insight that reading a book just can't replicate. But they also have symbolic value, connecting people to their past and identity, and preserving them is a major challenge. It requires careful, often expensive restoration techniques. There's always a balance to be struck between allowing public access and protecting the site from wear and tear or inappropriate development. #C. Time and perception.
Okay, we've covered a lot of heritage. How do we relate to the past emotionally? That feeling of looking back, nostalgic, number 4.
Nostalgia. That specific feeling, isn't it? A mix of pleasure, maybe fondness, but also a slight sadness when you think about the past. A wistful feeling, perhaps reminiscent.
What triggers it?
All sorts of things. Listening to old songs from your youth, looking at old photographs, visiting a place you used to know. Museums often try to deliberately evoke a nostalgic atmosphere to help visitors connect emotionally with a past era. And interestingly, nostalgic stories or images of the past, maybe idealized images of simpler times, can sometimes inspire modern movements, sparking revivals of old crafts or traditions, or influencing contemporary art and design.
Now, shifting from how we see the past to how we see other present cultures, especially those that seem very different. Exotic culture, number 33.
Exotic. This is a tricky one. It describes a culture that's perceived as highly distinct, unusual, maybe intriguing or mysterious, precisely because it's different from one's own, an alien society, a foreign ethos.
What tricky?
Because the perception is often superficial and can be problematic. What seems exotic to an outsider, maybe a tourist, is just everyday life, with all its complexities and challenges for the people living that culture. Literature and tourism marketing have often romanticized exotic cultures, creating stereotypes and overlooking the realities. It can turn a real place and people into a kind of fantasy.
Good point. So moving away from the exotic or the past, what about right now? Contemporary culture or modern culture, number 11.
Yes, this refers to the shared themes, beliefs, values, practices, and trends that characterize society today, the present-day society, the current ethos.
And what defines contemporary culture right now?
Well, it's incredibly diverse and fast-changing, obviously. But some major themes include the massive influence of digital technology and global interconnectedness. There's a growing emphasis, at least in rhetoric, on things like sustainability and fashion, food, lifestyle choices. You also see contemporary artists and thinkers constantly grappling with issues like consumerism, identity politics, climate change. And social media plays a huge role in amplifying diverse voices, but also in creating new forms of social pressure and fragmentation.
That leads perfectly into the last one in this section, cyberculture, number 23, the culture of the internet.
Exactly. Cyberculture is the distinct culture that has evolved specifically from the use of computers, the internet, and online communication. The digital society, the virtual community.
And it has its own norms.
Absolutely. Think about the norms that have developed around online privacy, or lack thereof, how people present themselves online, the etiquette of different platforms. Memes are a classic example of cyberculture, a unique, rapidly evolving form of digital communication and cultural shorthand. But its impact goes much deeper now. Cyberculture profoundly influences real-world politics through online activism, the spread of information and misinformation, the formation of online communities that shape opinions. It's created new ways of working, socializing, and engaging with the world that are fundamentally changing offline culture too.
Wow, okay. We have covered a huge amount of ground, from societal structures and conflicts to specific traditions and the impact of the internet. To wrap things up, let's look at the tools, the perspectives. We need to actually process all this diversity effectively and engage with it thoughtfully.
Yes, having the vocabulary is one thing. Applying it with the right mindset is another. A crucial concept here is cultural relativism. Number 19. This is the position, the viewpoint, that any cultural belief or practice must be understood and evaluated relative to its own cultural context. You can't just judge it based on the standards of your own culture. It promotes a contextual ethics, a non-judgmental view, initially at least.
This sounds like a core principle for anthropology, right? Studying societies without imposing your own biases.
Exactly. It's fundamental for anthropologists and sociologists trying to understand societies on their own terms. And more broadly, it's essential for fostering tolerance in diverse multicultural settings. It encourages you to ask why a practice exists within its specific context, rather than immediately labeling it as wrong or weird based on your own background.
But it's not without challenges, is it? Does it mean anything goes?
That's the major debate. Cultural relativism can sometimes clash with the idea of universal human rights. If a cultural practice within a specific context involves harm or violates what many consider universal ethical principles, how do you reconcile that? It raises very complex ethical questions about where the limits of relativism lie. It's a constant philosophical negotiation.
Okay, so cultural relativism is the analytical stance. What's the practical goal, the action we should aim for?
The practical objective, which really synthesizes everything we've discussed, is to embrace cultural differences. Number 22. This means actively accepting, welcoming, and appreciating the variations in traditions, beliefs, and perspectives that exist across cultures. To welcome diversity, appreciate variations.
And this isn't just about being nice, it has real benefits.
Huge benefits. Schools aim to teach this through cultural education and exchange programs. In international business, being able to genuinely embrace and navigate cultural differences is absolutely crucial for success. And at the community level, societies that truly manage to embrace their diversity tend to be more vibrant, more innovative, and ultimately more harmonious. They can draw on the strengths and perspectives of all their members. It's about building thriving, cohesive communities because of their differences, not in spite of them.
That's a powerful conclusion. So we've really gone through a comprehensive deep dive here, from the big picture concepts like civilization and social stratification, right down to specific forms of heritage like shanties and the complexities of cultural conflict, cyberculture, and the perspectives needed to navigate it all. These terms are now part of your C1 toolkit. They should allow you to discuss these complex topics with much greater nuance and precision.
Absolutely. Yeah. But remember, just hearing them isn't enough. To really make this C1 vocabulary your own, you have to use it actively. Don't just let it sit there in your notes. Maybe this week, challenge yourself. Try writing a short paragraph or even just a few sentences using terms like, say, acculturation, epistemology, and social stratification together in a meaningful way. That active application, wrestling with the terms in context, that's how they'll really stick.
Great advice. And to leave you, our listeners, with a final thought to chew on, something provocative, perhaps, let's loop back to that really deep concept we touched on, epistemology. If our culture fundamentally shapes how we know what we know, if it influences what we even accept as truth, then how do we ever reliably distinguish between what might be a universal human experience, a feeling, a need, a truth common to all people, and what is purely a learned belief, a truth constructed entirely by our specific cultural upbringing?
That's the big question, isn't it? It requires constant reflection, constant critical thinking about our own assumptions. A real philosophical challenge.
Indeed. Food for thought. If you found this helpful, like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel.